No, you don't have to be the perfect mother. The bottom line is attachment says you have to be able to emotionally connect with your kids. Men would say things like, well, I'm a very manly man and I need sex 3 times a day. No, you don't, buddy. What you need is for someone to hold you and for you to be able to ask for that, but you can't. Doesn't that look like health to you? No. I said, well, it looks like health to me. So there you go, and go to hell.
We are back. Hello, hello. Welcome to Open Relationships, Transforming Together. I'm your host, Andrea Miller. I'm joined by colleagues Joanna Schroeder and Brian Adkins. We have an amazing show teed up for you today. We have the one and only Sue Johnson. We'll give her introduction in just a few minutes. But I feel like, Brian, you wanted to start off. You had a little something for us. So do you want to just kick us off with a little something interesting and different?
Yeah, sure. So, because I know today's topic is going to be a lot about therapy with Sue Johnson, who has all the accolades in the world. She is amazing and can't wait to talk to her. But there's been something going on a lot. One of my friends just ran into this issue. I'll edit their name, the company's name out when I go to edit the show. But there are companies like that are what I call like kind of fly-by-night therapy. And it's online therapy that, you know, the biggest complaint is that there's not a good vetting process, that there's like no quality control, and that they're finding a lot of people aren't even licensed therapists. So the two sides of the argument, which is why I kind of really want your guys' opinion on this as people who do coaching and things like that, like the argument on side A says, okay, this is good because it's more affordable than getting real therapy. And a lot of people just need someone to talk to. And the other side of that is saying, okay, but these people aren't licensed and, you know, can be giving really bad advice or damaging, and or just bad therapists. That, like, you know, there's horror stories of people like not even showing up or whatever it is. And it's like,
I've even heard that it's like, it's some really kind of toxic back and forth, right? Or it's like, hey, you email in and you're desperate, and it's like, oh, somebody will be back to you in 24 hours.
And they never show up.
Or, you know, you're at a crisis at the time.
Right. And so that's kind of the question is like, is the benefit offsetting the potential damage? You know what I mean? Like those people that do just need someone to talk to.
I would say a couple things. One is, to me, the first thing that comes to mind is the transparency and ethics of it. If they say, listen, they're not licensed, but these are people that have raised their hand. They've got maybe some minimal amount of training, but they're not your sort of typical clinicians. So that, to me, is the first thing. If they're billing them as licensed, credentialed professionals and they're not, then it's like game over, right? That's just unacceptable. But if they say, hey, what we have found is that as people that we've screened for being compassionate and thoughtful, you know, and you presume they are screened and some at least minimal amount of training, could that be effective? I think it could be, versus talking to nobody. I mean, when I think about I don't know what kind of training goes into the suicide hotline, for example, but I don't believe those are all licensed psychotherapists. I think they're people that care profoundly and that are there to listen and help people in that moment of distress. And I do think if you can screen to make sure the people that show up for those kind of online, and they probably shouldn't call it therapy. They should probably call it online
support,
helping. Or right.
Well, like
exactly.
You can do peer-to-peer support can be very effective. Mm-hmm. And at that point, if you're upfront, you're like, this is peer-to-peer support, then the person at least knows, okay, this is going to help me in one way. And then they also may be trained to be able to be like, you know what, I would suggest you call the suicide hotline, or I would suggest you find a licensed clinical therapist.
Well, and this whole business of just like really, really listening and repeating back, oh, that sounds really hard. And, you know, and maybe reframing it or did I get is this what you're saying? This is what happened to you? Yeah, it is. I'm really sorry. That empathy and validation, as we've discussed with certain of our guests on the show, how profoundly healing and validating that can be. And let me also say this. I'm going to probably get a lot of hate mail. And this isn't theoretical. I've had therapists that have been terrible.
Yeah,
right?
me too.
And so I'm the first to say, God bless the therapists out there and the people that go with the best intentions. They spend a lot of money and time getting the degrees and practicing and so forth. There are a lot of amazing therapists. But I do want to say there are some not so amazing therapists. So even if this organization had licensed, credentialed therapists, are they the best? You know, and yeah, they might be licensed and credentialed. I'm not licensed and credentialed, but I do a lot of coaching. I just got the most amazing letter, like the most amazing letter last night. Somebody that I met recently, I just got right in there with him. He had an issue. His dad was estranged. They hadn't been in touch in 20 years. His dad abandoned him when he was a teen. Hadn't been in touch in 20 years. And this person and I, we just met at a conference. Then we had coffee when I was in New York a handful of weeks ago. I asked him, because he told me at that dinner, hey, my dad's in hospice. And I said, oh, Guy, you got to reach out. Like, you got to reach out. And, you know, and then anyway, not to go on more than I have, but so I'm not a licensed therapist, but I know for sure that in that moment, I gave him some good advice. And he just wrote back to me to say, took my advice. He reached out to his dad. They did a Zoom call. And then, you know, 2 days later, his dad was in hospice in a different state. And then his dad wasn't able to speak. So my new friend read something to him to talk about what it's been like, how he forgives him. And his dad passed away the next day. My new friend feels so at peace, so liberated, so grateful, right? So again, just to say, you don't have to necessarily be a licensed, credentialed therapist to be an amazing listener and to tell somebody the thing they needed to hear. And he knew. I just gave myself credit for saying, I just told you what you needed to hear. You just needed to kind of get that little nudge and be encouraged to do this thing. And it was the right time. You know, I was the right person at the right time for him.
Yeah, and you brought up a good point too about like sort of like the idea like shopping around for therapists, like because that I think that's something that maybe would be for these like online kind of therapy places, especially where they are the entry point to a lot of people that are lower income or have no experience with therapy at all. So there's like maybe the not transparent understanding that like your first one that you get matched with might not be a match, that you have to kind of shop around for.
It requires, it merits some education. And I haven't used it.
You got to find your Andrea.
You got to find your Andrea. Come to me, baby. But I agree. I think that it is incumbent upon these organizations to provide some education and say up front, you know what? Part of it, oh gosh, there's a bug flying around here. Part of it is a chemistry and it is a connection between two individuals, right? But I at the same time, what I want to say, and then let's get to Sue. It's great that this kind of low barrier to entry option, you know, lower cost and so forth, is available, right?
Yeah.
All things being equal, is it better to have it or not have it? I would contend it is to have it. I would love to see, you know, if there's data, like, you know, kind of the in terms of outcomes and results. But, you know, I guess it's like anything, buyer beware, right?
Yeah.
Get educated.
You know, one thing I like about Sue is that she has workbooks. There's a workbook that you can get the book. Not just that, then you get the workbook, and that is a low barrier to entry, and that a couple can work through that together. That's awesome.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get to. I think she's in the waiting room.
She's in the
right?
lobby. We should welcome our guest onto the show.
The one and only Dr. Sue Johnson. I'm so excited to have Sue joining us. Thank you so very much. Oh my gosh, Sue, your background is incredible. So just if everybody can listen and appreciate the wonder of Dr. Sue Johnson, I'm going to share a bit about who she is and why she's so amazing. Dr. Sue Johnson is a best-selling author, clinical psychologist, researcher, professor, speaker, and a leading innovator in the field of psychotherapy and adult attachment. A genuine pioneer and a true trailblazer, Sue is the primary developer of emotionally focused therapy, EFT, which has demonstrated its incredible effectiveness in over 35 years of peer-reviewed clinical research. EFT is considered the gold standard for couples by innumerable leaders and practitioners in the industry, and these are my words, Sue is regarded by many as its high priestess, but I'm going to come back to that. Sue has received a variety of awards acknowledging her significant contributions to the field of psychology, including the Order of Canada and the 2022 Lifetime Achievement Award from the Psychotherapy Networker. She has trained thousands of therapists worldwide in the principles and techniques of EFT. Sue has written several books, including her most famous, Hold Me Tight, 7 Conversations for a Lifetime of Love, that has helped, there we go, thanks for the visual, Joanna, that has helped over 1 million people, I know, strengthen their relationships. She has recently released a companion workbook that is packed with ways to help couples strengthen their bond and cultivate a lifetime of love. Sue lives in Victoria, British Columbia, with her amazing husband, John, who we just met. She adores the Argentine tango and kayaking on Canada's lakes and seas. And I just gave you like the 0.1% version of Sue Johnson. Sue, thanks again. Welcome.
You're welcome. I don't think I've ever been called a priestess before.
Hi,
Goodness
priestess.
me, I'm not quite...
It happened here first.
Oh, okay. Hi. My goodness. Okay. I'm not quite sure what to do with that, but all right. Jolly good.
Well, and I want to say we're happy and delighted and thankful to have you here on our show, Open Relationships. You're such a rock star. And I've ran across a really wonderful quote from the one and only John Gottman. He stated that you are the best couples therapist in the world. That is high praise, right? And so many more accolades. So I just said, I'm going to bundle them all up. I'm going to call her the high priestess and nobody is going to object. So,
all right.
So there we go. It's a whole new moniker. Okay. And I say that with sincerity to our viewing and listening audience. This is because of what Sue has pioneered and what she has developed that is so profoundly effective. And yes, you'll find her charming and witty and you'll want to be her best friend. But really what makes me so enthusiastic about having her on our show, she has the goods, folks. She has the goods. So let's get right into it. So we've talked already a little bit about EFT. I know a lot of people are familiar with it, but I also know that there are a few that have been sitting under a rock that aren't. So will you just talk about what EFT is and just give us a little bit of a foundation for the rest of the show?
Sure. Basically, EFT comes out of the humanistic tradition of helping people, and it comes out of the work of Carl Rogers, who basically said, wait a minute, in mental health, we seem to be putting people in categories. If we look at them as human beings, we all have places where we get stuck. We all want to grow, and we grow best in safety, in safe relationships. So the therapist should be safe, and the therapist should focus on the most powerful thing in the room, which is people's emotions, and help them walk into and through their emotions rather than coping with them, containing them all the time, trying to wipe them out, trying to say that they shouldn't have them. So that's a very broad and rich tradition. But since it all started really with me starting to work with couples and realizing that I didn't know what I was doing, and neither did anyone else in the field, which was quite a revolution for a passionate young graduate student in psychology. I think it wouldn't have really gone anywhere, except that I linked it. I realized what we were dealing with in distressed couples, what in distressed relationships, which are core in all mental health issues for everybody, in distressed relationships, was disconnection. That everyone was focused on conflict and stopping people fighting and getting people to agree, when in fact what I saw was the real issue was how emotionally disconnected people were. And most distressed relationships were about one person desperately banging on the door and saying, let me in, let me in. And of course, they're banging, so they look dangerous to the other person putting up more barriers and running away. And this dance could go on for years and kind of kept itself going. And this was really taking me into the work of John Bowlby, who was a British psychologist who started talking in the 1950s and 60s about the fact that we are bonding social animals, and that attachment is our natural attachment to others. Close attachment to a few precious others in particular is our natural environment. It's our natural ecological niche. If you like, we're fish and close relationships are the water. And that what he said was that mental health and relationships and society in general had started to ignore this most basic fact about human beings.
I just want to interject real quick. I just want for listeners to, it's such an amazing analogy. We are fish and our closest bonds are our water. And I just really want to drive home what's been fascinating, especially as I've studied more and more of your work, that we often think of relationships as a nice to have, but they are a need to have. And I feel like that's
right.
And, we can get into sort of this myth of this toxic myth of hyper-individualism, which I think is, has really caused so much just disruption and danger and hurt and heartache. But I wanted people to get that analogy in their heads. We are fish and our closest relationships are our water. We can't survive without them. Anyway, sorry, can you just pick up where you were?
No, thank you, because I think it's very important. Because if you think about it, if you take a fish out of water, it looks weird. It can't function. It flops about. It's a mess.
What's the word? It doesn't starve. It suffocates. It's not able to get its oxygen, right?
Yeah, and there's more and more evidence apart from attachment science, which we use in EFT to understand human beings. It's a developmental theory of personality, but it's also all about relationships. It puts people in the context of their closest relationships. If you look at it, there's more and more research that one of the core issues in our society is loneliness. And, I think things have changed, hopefully, in that loneliness was kind of, you can see it as just, oh, well, that's the way life is. We're all alone. If you want to be philosophical, just buck up, Or you can say, no, this was very popular a few years ago. No, strong human beings are more or less self-sufficient. They can look at themselves in the mirror every morning and say, God, you're wonderful. And that's enough. Well, the only people who do that are psychopaths, actually. And I don't think that we all want to be psychopaths. So, there were those sort of ways of looking at it. But what attachment science says and what all the new research says is that we ignore human beings' need for safe emotional connection with a few others and a community, a safe community, but basically for a few others who will come when we call. It's as basic as that. Who will come when we call, when we need. And if we have that safe connection, that's kind of a place to stand in life. It's a place to define who you are, to grow, and you naturally grow. That safety, in EFT we say, belonging leads to becoming. That safety lets you grow and face life challenges and problem solve. But when you don't have that safety, then you're like a fish out of water. You're flopping around. And I think that's one of the reasons why we've at the point where, mental health professionals, some of them now have books that look very official with something like 360 diagnoses in them. This is ridiculous. That might be one of the unpopular things. It's ridiculous. Okay. when I look at all the people that I see, and EFT is done in all kinds of cultures all over the world, with all kinds of different religions and classes of people, in the slums of South Africa, in Iran, in Finland.
Wow,
The
congratulations.
Finns are rather neutral. Yeah, they don't like talking about their relationships very much, the Finns. They're very reserved, and EFT is done everywhere. And the common thing you see is, never mind all the diagnoses. People tell you they're depressed, they're anxious, they're alone, they don't know how to create the relationships they need. They tell you that, my last client was perfect. She said, I don't want to feel because it's overwhelming and I don't know what to do with my feelings. No one's ever shown me what to do with them. But I can't live numb and empty either. So I'm stuck. And I said, yes, I hear you. I hear you. That's a very brilliant, a profound and courageous thing that you're saying to me. I understand. I understand completely what you're saying. And I felt like saying, you and millions and millions of other people. We live in incredibly affluent world in North America, and there has to be a reason why the rates of depression and anxiety are skyrocketing, particularly in our young people. We need to look at this. So you asked me what EFT is. EFT is an approach to growing people.
Yeah,
it's not just a way of helping people cope. It's an approach to growing people that sees people as social bonding animals and privileges emotion. Because we really, whether you come to EFT as a distressed couple, as a distressed individual, or as a distressed family, because we work with them all, we really see people as stuck in certain patterns of dealing with their emotion and dealing with relationships, and they're just stuck. They just kind of the patterns just replay. And what we do basically, in a very simple terms, is we create safety, we hold people, we reflect their reality to them so they can make sense of it, and we help them look at how they construct that reality every day, every minute, what they do with the feelings in their body, what they say to themselves about themselves, whether they reach for others or not, how they shut others down, how they shut themselves down, how they create this inner world, and then how they turn around and create the world with significant others. And it's all about emotion. It's, if you like, it's, speaking of metaphors, fish and water and all that, it's like a dance.
Yeah.
We look at the dance people do with their own emotions, their own experience themselves, and the dance they do with others, and how those things, in most people who come to see us and in many of us, kind of narrows down at some point in our life where we can't grow and we can't understand what's happening. We feel overwhelmed. And there's not that many ways we have of dealing with being overwhelmed as human beings. But I think I'm trying to answer you in a very general way. I don't know if it's working.
Oh, no, it's great. And I do have I'm bubbling with questions. I know Joanna
Yeah, me too.
But I have to ask, because I love, I was like, I love how you are willing to say these unpopular truths. One statement you made in a podcast that I listened to, you asserted that Freud was wrong. And so I would hear that. I'd love to talk to me a little bit more about why Freud is wrong. And I'm not just like zing, it's a fun zing. It is a fun zing. I attest to that. But I think it's so much deeper than that, because I'm not a scholar of psychotherapy, but I know enough, I believe, to say, when I think about hyper-individualism and how much of the West has evolved in terms of psychology, I feel like this Freudian approach has been the cornerstone of a lot of how people have been treated.
Well, that's a rich vein. We could go into that 1,000 ways. If you go very basically, Freud said that the most powerful thing that decides human beings and their lives and what they do, were the deep inner instincts of sex and aggression and what they did with them. That's what Freud said.
Right.
Bowlby said, and by the way, he was roundly hated for this, of course. He was completely ostracized and attacked. And
Bowlby was?
Yes, Bowlby was. He was threatened to be thrown out of all kinds of professional organizations. He was castigated. He was shunned as only the British can do it. The British are good at that sort of stuff. So he was shunned because he basically said, no, Freud was wrong. The most powerful thing in human beings is not the instincts of sex and aggression. The most powerful thing in human beings is the need for an emotional sense of connection with another human being. And that is basic. That is why we've survived. Actually, my colleague Frans de Waal, who's probably the greatest living primatologist in the world, who writes books about animals, but he's really writing about us, of course, because we're animals. He says that if our evolutionary ancestors had been distant and aloof, we would never have survived. We would never be at the top of the evolutionary chain, which you could argue we're not, but some people think we are.
Right.
So, basically Bowlby said, no, we're relational. And if you look at a child, a child seeks connection, and the most basic human conversation that starts when we're very small and ends when we take our last breath is basically reach and respond. Reach and respond.
Reach and respond.
Are you there? And the most basic question in love relationships is not, are we the same and do we agree and are we going to fight about this and are we going to agree about that? It's not. The most basic question is, are you there for me? L-E-R-E. Are you accessible, open, responsive, and engaged? Are you there for me? When I call, will you come? Can I count on you? Do you value me? Am I precious? If I call, will you put other things aside and come to me? Because I'm precious to you. I'm special to you. This is the most basic needs of human beings. The thing about attachment science is, and why it's so profound as a basis for helping people and helping people understand their lives and their relationships, is it's biology that tells you how come your nervous system is profoundly tuned to and completely responds to the look on other people's faces. What happens to you when you're scared and you look at your partner and your partner turns and puts their arms out to you and holds you? What happens to you? How come your nervous system goes, ah? How come your nervous system calms? That's the way you're built. Basically, what we've learned is there's a structure to our emotions, the signals we give, the signals our nervous system gives us. There's a structure to relationships. There's a structure to how we put our identity together. And once you know the structure, once you have a map, then growing people is a delight.
Talk about the map. Yeah, because I had map done as one of my questions. So you led right there. And I do want to come back. Well, actually, I'll just emphasize again for everybody listening and watching. First of all, 70% of our communication is nonverbal. So when Sue talks about that look, we all know the look or the not look, right? They're not even noticing. They're not even noticing. Dagger to the heart, right? And how we co-regulate. And I guess I would say how we co-dysregulate, right?
Yes. And you're saying something really important. For example, in our research studies, we would take people, hundreds of people by this point, changing their relationship. And we saw that some people had what we call a hold me tight bonding relationship, and some people didn't. And the people who had the hold me tight bonding relationship had great relationship at the end of therapy. And it didn't seem to have much to do with how distressed they were when they came in either. And they felt better about themselves. They were less they were less depressed, they were less anxious. And when we tested it 3 years later, these results had held. That's one powerful, powerful result for a short-term psychotherapy, okay?
Yeah, I just want to emphasize right there the efficiency of EFT and efficacy, meaning it's effective and efficient, and that it's lasting is, to me, I want everybody who's even slightly unhappy in their marriage or any relationship issue to really tune in here. And it's not just for marriage, right? As Sue says, it's for individuals and it's for families. But go ahead, I interrupted you.
I wanted to just clarify something quickly too. As somebody who's not a psychologist, what mattered to me a lot when I first read the book, which was well before we even started this podcast, was understanding that what is happening in this process is first creating safety. And Sue said that,
Yes.
But in practice, I think one of the reasons we're so afraid to go to therapy is because we think we're going to sit down on a couch and we're going to have to say, like, when my mother didn't get me the Christmas present that I wanted on Christmas, and and it starts with that, and then we're going to have to cry about our grandparents, and we're going to have to talk about our sex problems that we're having in our marriage right away, the first moment, and become vulnerable. That's really overwhelming. And what I love about everything that's outlined in Hold Me Tight was, no, you first need to be able to reconnect and feel safe and express love and have this place where then you can open up to here are my wounds, and open it up and feel safe enough to say, I'm really sorry for the role that I played in those wounds. And that's so different.
Yes, it's so different, and it's so human, if you like. It's not about a professional telling you what's wrong with you or giving you tips to cope with your life. It's somebody who sees your humanness, recognizes it, helps you hold it and accept it, walk into it and through it. And I just want to stay with the point Andrea was making about the nonverbals. What we saw in all these tapes of the couples that did go through and really use EFT, we saw them having these hold me tight conversations. But what we realized, and now we teach therapists this, is if you're going to take people into a level of emotional engagement where they really change, they don't change in therapy. Doesn't matter what model you're using, the research says people don't change unless they're really emotionally engaged in the therapy. Okay? And people don't get emotionally engaged if they're vigilant and they don't feel safe. Why would they?
Okay.
They're not going to open themselves up. But what we notice, speaking of nonverbals, is that if you're going to work with emotion, take people into their emotions and through, help them befriend those emotions, help them accept themselves and their emotions, and be able to use those emotions, you have to do it in a way with music that fits the bonding neurons in your body. So if I say the most profound things to you, high and fast, and lots of therapists go through training and never look at their own tapes of therapy. Okay, not in EFT.
Mm-hmm.
We train people. We show our tapes. We show what we do. A lot of big gurus these days never show what they do.
Yeah.
We show what we do all the time. We show you. We get people to look at their own tapes when they're in training. If you say the most profound things, like, and you say it high and fast, okay? You say, yes, I really understand. I really understand that for you, you've always, always, always been alone. And you're terrified. Now you can't even reach for anyone. You can't even recognize your partner's look of love because you're so terrified that if you recognize it, you'll lose it. It doesn't work.
So stressful. Just hearing that, I got stressed out.
No, stop.
What? Well, I'm talking to your prefrontal cortex. I'm talking to your information channel.
Yeah.
If I want you to move into emotions in a different way and dance with yourself differently and dance with your partner differently, I have to talk to your amygdala. I have to say, yes. That's so sad, isn't it? You're dying for love. Inside, you're longing for love. But somehow, when it's offered, right here, right now, you can't trust it. it looks dangerous. That's so hard. So you turn away and you're all by yourself, yeah? Yeah, that's so hard. Maybe we all do that at some point in our lives. That's so hard. That
You are the amygdala whisperer. The rumor and the myth is true. We just saw it in action. But it's brilliant. That is brilliant.
Well, in other words, you have to know, reach and respond sounds like a formula, but if you look at John Bowlby looked at mothers and children. He said that his theory of attachment science, which I think should be the basis of all psychotherapy, but, that's another unpopular view in some people in my field. John Bowlby just basically looked at mothers and children, but it's not a bad model. For years, I would talk about adult attachment and people would almost curl their lip in contempt, okay?
Oh,
when I first started talking, I was persona non grata,
persona non grata,
most of the time.
despite all the other accolades.
Yeah, I just couldn't bear to. I just knew that this stuff was gold. I just couldn't not follow it, But he looked at mothers and children and the bonds between them, and he looked at mothers who had secure bonds with their children, and he looked at the way they interacted. They weren't distant and blaming and judgmental and telling the kid information and telling the kid what to do all the time. They also came close, dropped their voice, talked softly. And what does that do? The relationship message there is, I'm here. You're safe with me. I'm here for you. I see you. I see you. The number of people who come to me who are traumatized, have been traumatized in their family of origin, and they always say the same things. They say things like, nobody saw me, I was invisible. Nobody saw me, I was invisible. We can't do that as human beings. The idea that we should be able to look in the mirror and tell ourselves we're wonderful and that should be all right is ridiculous.
Right. That's back to the being the psychopath, right? Or narcissist, or something that is not at all the kind of person that we want to grow.
No.
But
that's right.
I want to come back to the map. And in part, again, I feel like I'm bubbling with more questions, Joanne. I know you are too. But when I think about this business of having a map, is that what is that, and how do people get it?
Well, for example, if there's a book just out, no, not just, it was someone talking to the Dalai Lama. Please don't get me wrong, I have huge, I'm a bad Buddhist, okay? So I have huge respect for the Dalai Lama and that whole tradition, okay? But it was Sharon Bedgley, who I also respect, but they wrote this book called Destructive Emotions, which I found most annoying. And in about page 3 of the book, it says something like there are, 1,680 negative emotions. Are you joking? Well, then I just better give up being a psychotherapist, because mostly people come to me because they're struggling with what Bowlby called frightening, alien, and unacceptable emotions. So are you kidding me? So no, you can't do that. And people like Ekman, who write about emotion, people like John Bowlby basically say, no. If you listen to people, if you listen to human beings all over the world in different cultures, and if you listen to people, really we're all struggling in the end. We struggle with anger, and anger can be positive, but lots of times it's kind of reactive and it's a defensive reaction to threat. What we're all struggling with is grief, sadness, loss, fear of abandonment and rejection, fear of the fact that we cannot control our lives. We are vulnerable whether we like it or not. We all know we're going to die. We all know that we will lose things, right? We don't We're not in control of our environment, no matter what the present culture tells us with all our Rambo movies and
Well, I mean, it's more
we're vulnerable.
mythology, right? I mean, we have a pop culture that's dominated in mythologies, from the toxic hyper-individualism, and it's just that sole pioneer or sole CEO or sole person that just made it on their own to describe that we actually have control. And I feel like there's so much in our mythology that is causing people to be profoundly upended because they can't live up to these toxic myths, and nor should they.
Exactly right. They can't live up, and there's very little out there that really says, oh, this is who we are. See, I think attachment science does this. It says this is who we are. We are human beings whose most basic need is for emotional connection, to know we matter to others and that they will come when we call. And this is more basic than sex or aggression. And when we don't have that, we start to fall apart. We go into very negative ways of coping with it, like addiction, which is just a way of numbing yourself out and getting out of the pain.
Right.
And basically, we struggle with sadness, loss, uncertainty. We struggle with fear of all kinds, vulnerability, and no solution vulnerability often because we don't know how to find a solution. So we're overwhelmed, right, by our emotions. And then we say, oh, emotion is the enemy. And we struggle with shame for what you just said, which is somehow we feel that if we hurt this way and if we can't find a way to feel competent and confident and special, which is what all the magazines tell us we're supposed to feel, then there's obviously something wrong with us. And just to give you a feel for the kind of map, Bowlby as a young man walked through the streets of London, and he looked at this is how it all started. He looked at the delinquents that were lining the streets of London, and the sort of mode of the day was that these delinquents were just bad boys, mostly boys. What we were supposed to do with them is just punish them and put them in jail, and then they'd learn, right?
Sounds like a lot like in America too, right?
Yeah, all societies go to that one. What he said was, you have to look at the despair underneath the contempt.
Mm-hmm.
You have to look at the pain underneath the anger. Now, I haven't got that quote exactly. I'll give it to you exactly because I've got it taped on my microphone. He said, behind indifference is misery. Behind callousness, despair, right? And the basic message people give is, I will never be hurt again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And to do that, you have to shut down. Trouble is, when you shut down, you can't grow. There's no solution. You're stuck. You're stuck in a trap. So, that's what Bowlby said. And an attachment-orientated therapy like EFT sees people's pain, sees people's aloneness, and valid. But I'll give you a good example. One lady I work with that I'm using right now to teach therapists, she had 5 different diagnoses. I can't remember what they all were now. Of course, one is always borderline with women. Women, when doctors don't know what to do with women, don't you know we're borderline? Okay, I don't quite know what that means. Neither does anyone else. But it's bad. Okay, and so she had all these diagnoses. When we go into her emotions and take this view that Bowlby has of us as human beings and our vulnerabilities and what they are, and how we only have so many ways of coping with them, especially when we're alone, when we feel alone and rejected and abandoned. When you go into that kind of vulnerability, Bowlby would said things like, it's easier for children, it's actually functional for children to say to themselves, I can't find mommy and daddy, I'm all alone. Mommy and daddy are sometimes cruel to me or distant. This is terrifying. Life is terrifying. I'm overwhelmed. It must be that I'm a bad little boy or girl.
Right.
Yeah. It must be that I'm bad. There's hope in that, because then I can be a good little boy or girl and mommy and daddy will love me. It's much better than saying, I'm a small, vulnerable, fragile little being, totally alone in the world, with no safety anywhere, and anything could happen, and I have no control, and no one will come because no one cares. You can't bear that.
That's the existential, that's the greatest existential risk.
I'm having a light bulb moment connecting a few things together here. We know right now that our young men and teenage boys, and all teenagers, but particularly our young men and teenage boys, are really struggling with their mental health. Suicide rates are horrifyingly high. And we know that lockdown and being isolated played a part in that. But I'm also thinking about, and Sue, you might relate to this since your children were born at a similar time as my older children, that there was such a sense of heroic individualism for moms that I, as a mom, was expected to do everything. I did every single thing. I changed 90% of the diapers. I was the one that was up with the kids all the time. I did the cleaning. I did the cooking. I knew all of it. I did that whole mental load. It's being called out a lot more right now. But when I think in the late 90s, in the early 2000s, if you had children then, being the only one who did all of it was heroic. And now I'm thinking about those children, 15 to 25, and that sort of shut down that. I wonder if the way we reacted, being afraid to ask for help, being afraid to be connected because we were supposed to be alone, I wonder if there's a way in which we taught that to these children.
I don't know if we taught it to them. I think when we don't build a society based on who human beings are and what they really need, we end up in impossible situations and we fall through the cracks.
Right.
And certainly I resonate with your idea that women, feminism was supposed to be a liberation, I think.
Mm-hmm.
That's my idea of it. Speaking as a feminist, that's how I see it. Or was it? It seems to me we switched. I don't just want to be at home, the little woman at home, I want a life.
Yeah.
What we did, which is so female, which is we said, I want a life and I'll do all the other stuff as well.
Yes.
I'll do it all as well. So I'll be the most perfect mother, the most perfect partner. I'll be ever so sexy. I'll wear all kinds of lingerie and shave my pubic hair in the exact shape of that you would like. And I'll be a friend to my friends, and I'll be in the community, and I'll be the CEO of a company, and I'll write books, and you gotta be joking.
It's a lot.
Oh, by the way, I'll be the most perfect mom. Is there a woman anywhere in this civilized world who does not feel that she was not a good enough mom?
Yeah.
Totally.
I don't think so.
It's like the book More Work for Mother. The basic premise of it is that as technology increases, it's supposed to make women's lives easier. We just started piling more things on women. Before, you had refined flour that came in bags. People didn't make cakes. And then you could get flour in a bag, and so all of a sudden women had to make cakes every night. And now we're living, and it's observed. It's a wonderful
cakes.
book.
I just add open relationships. I want to say fewer cakes, people.
Yeah. Well, and now it's like, not only do I have a job, I also have all these kids. I have to do all the kid stuff. Now there's technology. I also have to, mirror my son's Instagram on my phone and make sure that he's not being rude to people. And I have to know where he is and track him on Life 360. There's 100 apps that are supposed to make it easier to parent. And what it actually is doing is making me bonkers.
That's right. Because it gives you all these expectations. And one of the things that happened to John Bowlby as he became more famous was that the feminists, the more radical feminists, went for him in England and told him that he was putting an impossible load on mothers. And his response was, and I think that's a real distortion of Bowlby. If I understand Bowlby and attachment and all that we've studied in attachment, because really adult attachment as a field only got going at the beginning of this century, and I've been very honored as a clinician to be part of that, okay? There's now thousands of studies on adult attachment, but it's still not really out in the mainstream. I don't think so. People are using the word more, But Bowlby basically said, and I hope this is right, Bowlby basically said, no, you don't have to be the perfect mother according to some formula. The bottom line is attachment says you have to be able to emotionally connect with your kids. That's the answer. You don't have to do, I do this. My son knows it. He doesn't mind. For example, me and my son. Okay. I certainly wasn't the most perfect mother. I was doing research studies and teaching people over the world. And there was a point, which was a bit crazy. Actually, I didn't do this till he was older, where I was on a plane, every weekend going to talk to somebody, which became a bit crazy. But the bottom line is I had an emotional connection with my son. And so he could tell me he was mad. We could fight. I could say very unmotherly things to him. When I think about it now, like, you are a little creep. You are the most judgmental, horrible little creep I've ever met in my life. Are you my son, or where did you come from? We still do. We fight, okay? Because now, in terms of politics, we seem to have suddenly found ourselves in different camps, which is most bizarre. But for me, I listen to him and I learn. Surprise, surprise, I learn. I say things to him like, conservatives believe this, and he says, no, I don't believe that. And so we learn from each other. There's an openness and a responsiveness. And when we have hurt each other in our lives, he's now 32. When we have hurt each other in our lives, we come back and we say, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I wasn't listening. I'm so sorry. I didn't hear you, and I don't want you to feel hurt. And this is what was happening to me. And this is the emotional connection. Bowlby was saying, this is like oxygen for us. This is not an incidental. This is a necessity. This is like oxygen. This is what you give to your kids.
This is our water. We are fish and this is our water, right?
Like one of the big fights we had, I remember it, was I said to my son when he was about, I don't know, what was he? Had he gone to university? No, I think he was in last year of high school. We would go for coffee. And I remember saying to him, it's me or the phone. It's me or the iPhone.
Oh God! So you made the cardinal. You made the cardinal mistake. I do that all the time. It's like it's a little bit that threat. It's like, oh, are you gonna make good on that one?
So I said to him, if you're coming out with coffee with me, and we're going to be connected, which is my intention, I can't compete with your phone. I'm so sorry. I don't know how. Mm-hmm. You are distracted by it constantly. You're monitoring it. I won't do it. I find it so upsetting. I won't do it. So I'm so sorry. I'd rather not go for coffee. Oh my goodness. The first couple of times I did it, like full-blown 17-year-old outrage, and I was, what was I? I was old. I was silly. I was, I don't know what I was. I was everything.
We never get it. We never get it with the teenagers. Mom, you just don't get it, right?
That's right. You don't get it. But I did get it. And I said, here's what I get for me. You get me or the phone. You don't get both. And so finally he slammed the phone down, right? And we went and had coffee. And that was me basically saying, no, there's nothing more important. Information is not connection. There's nothing, we mistake the two. We think we get, like my daughter said to me once, I have 350 friends on Facebook. I said, no, you don't. They're not friends. You don't know who they are, and they don't know who you are. They're not friends. They will not come when you call, right? And so this, I think Bowlby basically said emotional connection is where it's at. And that was, when I say it to you right now, it might sound obvious, but the field of couples therapy was, so not there. In the beginning, when I started showing my tapes, and I had research right from the beginning, right from my thesis, right? In the beginning, when I started showing my tapes, I would be told, mostly by, I must say, by elder academic gentlemen, let's call them that. I would be told that I was creating enmeshment, codependency. I was collapsing people. I was messing with people's ability to define themselves. I think codependency was the big one I was creating. I was creating neurosis. It was obvious to me. I would show a tape and I would say, I actually remember showing this tape and saying, I'm awfully sorry, but are you looking at the same video as me? I'm looking at these people, these two people. It was a lesbian couple, actually. I said, I'm looking at these two women. They are being incredibly courageous and open. They are dealing with their emotions in a balanced way. They are talking about what they need. They are trying to listen to each other. This seems to me to be, they're showing a moment of real mental health and connection.
Well, and maturity, right?
No, when I was told, no, you're collapsing them.
Wow.
I said, what do you mean? Oh, what you mean is she's crying. Is that what you mean? But if you listen to her as she's crying, she's actually pinpointing her emotions, befriending them, sharing them, and using them as a compass to what she needs. Doesn't that look like health to you? No.
So what? Okay.
I said, well, it looks like health to me. So there you go, and go to hell, which was my backup thing in the beginning was, I will talk to you and then go to hell. Okay.
Well, I mean, I always feel like when you're a pioneer, you're going to disrupt the status quo, right? And people are going to come out and feel threatened. But talk about this codependency, just if you don't mind, just another minute or two. What are people getting? I mean, I guess in part, what are they getting wrong, right? Because agreed, codependency is, on the one hand, a bad thing, but I've actually never thought about it like this before. We need to be dependent.
Yeah.
I mean, that's your whole point.
It's like with enmeshment.
We need to be dependent.
There's effective dependency,
right,
and ineffective dependency. Okay,
correct.
And if you're, when I would get these, not so much now. People don't use those words so much anymore. But I would get these referrals, and the referrals would be things like, oh, this is a codependent woman, and I would look and I'd see she's anxiously attached.
Okay.
She keeps calling to her partner. She does it in a way that's difficult for him to hear because she's angry and she's confused and she's overwhelmed. So her messages aren't very clear. And what he does is he doesn't know what to do with it. So he turns and he persuades her that there's something wrong with her, that she shouldn't feel these things and need these things. And she believes him. And then she loses all balance and all ground because then she hears, I'm unlovable. And what on earth do you do with that besides crawl under a rock? And then she'd crawl under a rock. And then he'd say, there you are, you see, you're depressed. It's your problem. And then she'd come out spitting and enraged. And everyone would say, look, you see, she's completely unhinged. The issue is we would take people like that. And I'm thinking of a woman. It wasn't always women who did that. Men did it slightly differently. Men would say things like, well, I'm a very manly man and I need sex 3 times a day. And my response inside my head would be, no, you don't, buddy. What you need is for someone to hold you and for you to be able to ask for that, but you can't. Okay, but I can't.
That's a huge insight.
I have to wait for him to get there, right? But we would take those people and we would work with them in EFT for 15 sessions and everything would shift.
Okay, hang on. That's a great point because you talk about the efficiency of EFT. 15 sessions, are people coming to you or your colleagues once or twice a week typically?
No, usually once. When we used to do it in research studies, we did it once a week.
Okay.
The point is, if you know where you're going, if you know what home looks like, you can take people there. If you don't know where you're going and you're messing about trying to have 30 ways of understanding people's emotions and how they deal with them and how they push other people away when they want them to come close, you can go round the houses
forever. Well, and I think that's why psychotherapy gets dunked on as much as it does. And this idea that, to Joanna's point, you lie on your couch, you dunk on your parents, you feel badly, and for years and years. And by the way, I'm not dunking on psychotherapy. I appreciate that it has been very beneficial for some, but it strikes me, that there's a huge dependence on the therapist itself, and I want to come back to that. What I love about EFT is this idea of process. And when I think about 15 sessions, that is 3.5 months. That is not 3.5 years. It is not 35 years, right? It is a relatively small amount of time to have your relation, not even just your marriage, but being given this map and to understand this. It is a chance for transformation in less than 4 months. I mean, I would take that trade any day.
Well, yes, I think the thing is, one of the huge things that got in the way of couples therapy and got in the way of helping people with relationships is all this stuff about how, hey, you suggested I come up with some unpopular views.
We'll take another one.
I've got another one now. I've got tons of them, okay? One of them is that love is a mystery, and really it's all about sex and sexual desire, and sexual desire has a best before date. So, love is kind of like what they're really talking about is infatuation. That's what they're talking about, not love, okay?
Right.
But the idea was love is a mystery, you can't understand it. Well then, what on earth are you going to do in couples therapy? Because the fact of the matter is, most couples come and they don't just want less conflict, they want love. They want to feel safe and connected in their relationship, and they don't know how to do that. They have no idea. Half of them have never actually seen a good relationship. So how would they start? They've never seen the dance they're trying to do. They just know their nervous system just keeps saying, this isn't it, this isn't it, this isn't it, where is it, where is it, where is it?
And so they're living in, using the fish analogy, it's like they're living in something that's not exactly water. I don't know, I'm totally screwing up the analogy here.
Well, they keep trying to get into the water. They dive in, they have a moment where they can breathe, and then they're out again. They don't even know. They don't even know what it feels like. When we help people have hold me tight conversations, therapists, we've trained therapists all over the world, thousands of therapists, and we've had very resistant groups of therapists, okay?
Sure, I believe
We've had very resistant clients. We do our stuff with the US military and the Canadian military, and
that's so cool.
I remember going and running a group years ago at Leavenworth with a whole bunch of folks soldiers and their wives, the soldiers had been on 3 deployments. Give me a break, 18 months each. This is too much. This is too much. This is too much. And the relationships are in tatters, and we would I remember one guy said to me, ma'am, can you explain to me exactly how this is going to make me a better soldier? I said, yes, Lieutenant, I can. Sit down, take out your notebook, and I'll give you 5 points. And I wasn't kidding.
Excellent.
Okay, I wasn't kidding, because securely attached people are more confident. They trust their experience. They're better at dealing with stress. They're more flexible when they deal with stress. They keep their emotional balance under stress. They're better at dealing with other people, so they create more coherent teams. I gave him all these, so then
it's just so foundational, right? And that's I feel like it's just a round of applause for Sue, because this work is so foundational. Oh yeah, here we go. And in fact, it made me think. I wrote down, you said the most basic need is that we matter. I have long, I was a CEO and leader. I always say the best advice I got was probably 10, 15 years ago. Make sure your team know you care, right? You essentially are saying the same thing. Part of me can't help not to hijack the conversation. Do you have a book for CEOs? Because I feel like we spend so much, or leaders, right? We spend so much of our time, so many of us as professionals, we're in organizations, right? I would think that this would work. It works for the military. It works in, in families and couples. Do you train, or do you ever think about applying this specifically to?
It has been applied. It does work with keeping people engaged and creative and in teams. Of course it does. Because the bottom line is, and the reason the codependency argument is all off, is that all the research says safe connection with a few others, that internal sense that you matter to a few others who will come when you call, makes you stronger.
Amen.
Not weaker. It makes you stronger.
That's why you're the high priestess.
Well, and so when I say to somebody, yes, this is the nub. This depressed lady who came to see me, we worked with her. I was talking about her before, and she had all these diagnoses. And when we went into her emotions and I stayed with her and I said yes, and I was with her and I allowed her to have her emotions, what she came up with was she was heartbroken. Mm. And you can call that depression if you like. You can call it borderline. You can call it anxiety disorder. You can call it OCD. You can call it any damned intellectual name you like. She was heartbroken. And that we know what to do with that. What you do with heartbreak is I stay with you. I hold you. We go through it together. You weep. You allow yourself the longings that you've shut down for years so as not to hurt, and you grow. That's it. It's like, so that's an example of MAP. That's an example of, so, we would work with these very resistant therapists or people, like that guy who said, ma'am, can you kindly tell me how to be a better soldier? I think I said something mean at the end, something like, and soldier, not only that, but after doing this course with us, you'll be a better husband and a better lover, and you'll be better friends with who you are inside.
Yes.
You'll be able to hold you more.
Yeah.
And we took both people through that. So, yeah, and this stuff is wired into us. It's like we didn't create it. We're plugging into the basic science of who we are, which is why couples go to they even do it online. They go to our Hold Me Tight online program, right? Which is getting a bit old now. We need to revise it with some younger couples, but hey, it's still a damn good program. And, people go and they take that program when they're doing couple therapy or just by themselves, and they sit together and they do this interactive program online that teaches them how to have a hold me tight conversation. These conversations shift everything. Our whole nervous system responds to them. They're not just, how can I say it? They go to the level of identity. So, they go to the basic level of, can I trust life? Is there a place for me in life? When somebody listens to you and takes your vulnerability and holds it with you and is there for you, you get, I'm acceptable, I am lovable, I am special to this person, even with all my flaws, I matter, this is about identity, right? When our experience is when you take people into this vulnerability, help them understand their needs, whether you're doing individual or couple therapy, their sense of connection with self changes. They have a more secure connection with self. Their sense of being able to let other people in change. They become stronger, which is what Bowlby said. Bowlby said, strongly connected people with even one secure relationship with one parent are more resilient, more balanced, more able to deal with life than people who've, Bowlby was sent away at, I can't remember exactly how old, he was sent away to English boarding school. He said, I wouldn't send a dog to English boarding school. And I wouldn't send my dog. I have 2 dogs that I adore. I wouldn't send my dogs to English boarding school. Never. Because they come to me every morning and they look at me and they put their head on my knee and they're saying, am I yours?
Yeah.
Do I matter? Are you there for me? Are you going to feed me biscuits? Can I count on you? Are we together? And I say, yes, you're my beautiful, beautiful, beautiful doggy. And I think that's why we love dogs. Dogs show us they love us and they need us.
Well, yeah.
They don't mess about. They don't mess about.
Unconditionally. But I want to come back to this whole business of identity, the sense of self. I see you. I mean, it strikes me, for me to be able to say, I see you, say to my husband or my kids, it's like something has to change in me. It's like I need to be, and I don't know how to articulate it, but I feel like that sense of self, it's like if I have the ability to see, almost like see and accept myself, then I can see and accept my husband and the people around me, right? And I feel like I'm simplifying it, but it feels hopeless. If I can't do it for myself, then it feels like how can I possibly hold that space for somebody else?
You're right, but I don't. You're right, but that's one of the things that the popular media say that I think is misleading. So you're right, and it's confusing because the popular media say things like, you have to accept yourself before you can accept other people. Okay, then my response when people say that to me is, okay, then clever. Tell me how you start to accept yourself. If you don't have anybody reaching for you, or you've never had any models, and you don't know what it looks like, and you don't even know what acceptance feels like. So, yeah, the more comfortable you are with your vulnerability, the more you'll be able to see and respond to other people. But where do you learn to be comfortable with your vulnerability?
Right, it's the chicken and the egg, right? And I love how
it's the chicken and egg. So the thing that you see in Oprah magazine, which is like these little formulas, you have to accept yourself, and it
can be really maddening.
Like, don't do that,
right?
Because it leaves people standing in front of the mirror saying, "I accept me, I accept me," which is nonsense, of course.
Well, and it can be maddening, right? I feel like a lot of times we'll see the memes and the tropes and all these things, and it's back to this feeling of feeling, at least for me, like a failure, right? Like these platitudes. Okay, we can all agree that it's a good idea to love unconditionally and accept yourself and so forth, but how, right? And that's, I feel like, where we end up back to this, sort of toxic pop culture that's based on and predicated on a lot of these myths of how the phrase I love that I learned from you, how we human. It's like we're in this massive distortion field in terms of how we human.
Yes, and I think the thing is, it seems to me, which is kind of a depressing road to go down, that with all our technology and all our affluence and all our apparent progress, we actually aren't paying attention to who we are as human beings. And so we're going down the road where society is not crafted for who we are. We're not. Society is not crafted for loving communities. I grew up in an English pub. I was a kid in an English working class pub, which was probably my parents would be put in jail for child abuse now, because I was in the pub. I was standing on a little stool, drying glasses and watching everything going on. I'm sure that warped my personality in lots of ways. Okay, I don't think I'd be here today. But what I saw in that English pub, I've been thinking about this a lot lately. That English pub was diverse as hell. Upper class people, the admirals and the lieutenants from the Navy, working class people, poor people. Little old lady who lived alone would come in every night and sit and drink a sherry and make it last for 2 hours. Everyone would talk to her. Weird people, the magic guy who couldn't do tricks even at birthday parties, and poor people, and conservative people, radical people, everybody. The ladies of the night came into the pub. Okay.
It sounds like Cheers,
and-
where everybody knows your name.
Yes,
Right?
It was more than Cheers, though, because it was more diverse.
Okay.
What I saw was that people, it was diverse. People were different, and they'd fight, and they'd get into arguments, and they'd hurt each other. But the bottom line was, there was an unwritten level in that pub that, well, we're all human, aren't we? We're all members of this family. Most of them came into the pub every day. They didn't come for the booze. They came for the connection. And my father's job was to make it all safe. He'd say, if somebody's getting kind of hot, he'd walk around the bar and put his big hands down on their shoulder and say, now, Sid, let's just calm down, shall we? And yes, that's right. Yes, good idea. Have another beer, right? And so he'd take care of it. He created the safety and the order. And I would watch all these people, and they connected. They talked. And when they disagreed, it was all right, because they knew that they could, that their relationship would survive the disagreement. It wasn't, I disagree with you, therefore you are bad, therefore you are, I will call you names, therefore you are, I might call you names because it was an English pub. But 5 minutes later, I'd say, sorry for calling you that. Sorry for calling you that name, Sid. Sid would say, that's all right, Jim. Just don't do it again, okay? And it would be all right, okay? So there was a sense of connection that I think most of us long for and don't have.
Well, and don't you think that, at least in America, I'm guessing Canada's pretty similar, and Great Britain, that increasingly we're in this cancel culture. And I realize that, a million eyes are rolling right now, like, oh, cancel culture. But it's like cancel with a big C versus little c. Like you said, what you just described, it feels like we're so impatient with each other. We're so unwilling to engage, right? You don't like what I've said? F off, right? And I might not even tell you. I might just never, ghost you and never respond to you again. Does that?
That's right. And the line is, this gets me. The line is, I will not talk to you because I feel unsafe.
Exactly.
Hang on. I'm just talking here. I don't have a cudgel in my hand or what do you mean? You feel unsafe? We can't connect if we can't talk. It's an interesting one. It's
But it feels like that also goes back to trying to build that safe place to have the conversation, right?
That's right. And I feel like somehow with the best of intentions, this is just my vision, of course, that the best of intentions we have tried in the last few years to create a more equal or diverse or, empathic society, but somehow it's backfired. Somehow it's like, wait a minute, no, we're even more polarized. Yeah. We're even more in little groups. We're even more, you either belong in this group or you're the bad guy. What the
It's been wild to see that pendulum swing from these are the things we can't talk about. Oh, those people are too sensitive. Now that's we're doing the same things on this side. These are the things we can't talk about. These people are too sensitive. And I keep thinking
right. And everyone has to self-censor.
Yeah.
And censoring doesn't work for connection. And then everyone's more disconnected, and then everyone's more vigilant, and then everyone feels more at risk. Give me a break. You can see this. Somebody said to me, I notice, Sue, that you don't put pronouns after your name. I said, no, I don't. I've never really felt the need. And they say, well, what, don't you worry about using pronouns in therapy? And I say, well, no, because every time I go and look at the list of pronouns, they've got longer. And I'm almost sure to make a mess up. I can't remember them all. So they said, well, then what do you do? And I feel this is obvious to me. Maybe somebody will take issue with this, but I say, I'm old-fashioned. I ask you your name. I use people's names.
Yes.
To me, you're Jeff. Whether you're black, brown, some variation of, trans, lesbian, whatever you are, religious, non-religious, conservative, radical, you're Jeff, aren't you? Let's meet as Jeff and Sue. Isn't that what human beings do? Isn't that kind of the way we created something called society in the beginning? You don't have to be like me. I don't have to be like you. Do we? Can we just call each other by name? Is that such a radical idea?
So, Sue, you advocate for this great idea of growing each other. And I feel like it's implied in the last hour's worth of conversation, but it's such an important idea that we've got to wrap up in just a moment. I'd love for you to talk about this concept of growing each other.
Well, one of the things that I found the most fascinating over the years, working with all these different kinds of couples, many of whom were struggling with not just relationship distress, but associated anxiety and depression and traumatic stress, was that when the couple started to come together and help each other with their vulnerability and call in a way that the other person could hear and respond, when they started to come together, they grew each other. That the individuals would grow. The individuals, and we know that this is what happens in secure attachment naturally. This is what happens between mothers and children, fathers and children. We know this. This is what happens, that belonging leads to becoming. But these couples would grow each other. People would become depressed. Wives would become suddenly more confident and go out and do things like go back to grad school and start a business. And drinking husbands would suddenly turn and learn how to be a father and feel fantastic about it and start teaching Little League. And the people would change. They'd grow each other. So this is what I mean. And I mean, we in individual therapy, in EFIT, emotionally focused individual therapy, which we haven't paid attention to over the years. We are now. I have a book that came out last year on it, a primer on EFIT, and lots of my trainers are doing it now. We do that without the other partner in the room. We do it, we all walk around with a cast of characters in our head that help define who we are. And what people do often is we have central people who decide who we are, where we learn certain things about ourselves. And what we do in individual therapy, if we don't have a partner to have a new kind of conversation with, we have people tune into that image in their head and talk to that person. I was very lucky. I had the most amazing, amazing father. I don't think I'd be here right now if I didn't have this amazing father. And, I know that when things get very stressful for me, I can close my eyes and tune into his voice in my head. And he just conveys this sense of security and balance that leaves me in a different place. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, I know that when I get a new book that comes to the door, and for the first 3 seconds, I say, oh my goodness, look at that. My God, I did it. Whoa. Then a voice comes in and it's my mother. My mother says, now, don't get all full of yourself. Don't get that. Who do you think it matters, that book? Nobody's going to read that book. It's not going to make any difference at all. Just go and do the washing up and come down to earth. That's my mother. So, we help people talk to the key people in their lives where they've defined themselves. Thank goodness I can turn to my mother and say, oh, I never understood why you needed to do that, but I'm not going to help you. I'm not going to do that. It's okay. I'm all right. But I do go to my husband. I say, do you think this book will make a difference? And of course, he, bless him, he says, of course it will, sweetie. It's a great book. It was important. I'm so glad you wrote it. So, we're always defining ourselves in relation to the people that matter to us.
Well, and Sue, I'm so grateful for you to share that even you, High Priestess, the greatest couples therapy in the world. Not my words, John Gottman's words, not my words.
He did not call me a high priestess.
Oh, well,
he called me
I'm going to get all that credit. All that credit goes to yours truly.
All right.
No,
okay.
but the thing that I really want to tease out here is that even you, with all that success and accolades and all that, right, and all that you've been through and all the, that you've had to endure, that you still feel doubt from time to time. I was actually listening to with Jason Bateman, that podcast.
Smartless.
And he had Keanu Reeves on. Yeah, Smartless. And Keanu Reeves talks about after he gets done with the job and he lays on his couch for 3 days, and if he doesn't have the next movie booked, he starts to get in his own head. Keanu Reeves.
Of course.
And I'm just like, okay, well then when I'm feeling doubt, just little old me, okay, I don't have to feel bad. I think it's the point you were making a little while ago, that it's like I feel bad that I feel doubtful, or I feel bad that I screwed up again. And so I really appreciate that honesty, because golly, I mean, it's so, back to the loneliness.
Andrea, we're all vulnerable.
Indeed.
And we've got this silly thing about celebrity. I hate gurus, okay? I hate them because they're a myth. I don't want to be a guru, and we're all, and people like the Dalai Lama are delightful because they give away their guruhood. Somebody asked him how he dealt with fear, the Dalai Lama. This is a good place to end, actually. How he dealt with fear. And of course, everyone thinks he's going to say, oh, I sit and meditate myself to death. And of course, or I pray or something. He doesn't. You know what he said? He said, I close my eyes and I think of my mother's love.
Oh.
And what I teach my monks is that when they're scared, I teach them to stand out and call out mother. And I had this flash. Can you imagine the shift that would happen in the world if just for 1 hour on one day, when everybody got scared, instead of doing whatever we do with it, shut down, blame somebody,
freak out, all the things,
drink, we all turned and gave ourselves permission to yell, mother. Right? Of course, the trouble is, he has an image of a loving mother in his head, and some of us don't have that.
That's the conundrum. That's the conundrum.
But listen to what he says. He says that, so yes, we're all vulnerable. We're all overwhelmed by life. We all struggle through life. We all avoid vulnerability at times, of course. We all long for love. And this is the basic image of humanity that attachment science gives us. And it's gold. It's gold for psychotherapy. It's gold for relationships. It's gold for the fact that if we're going to grow as human beings, we have to start where we are, which is recognizing who we are. So yeah, that's why I go on programs like this and talk to brilliant people like you guys who tell me amazing things like I'm a priestess or something.
Forevermore. There is only one. Sue, you are amazing. I hope you will come back on our show. And
you were fun to talk to.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, we adore you. It's sincere. You could feel it. By the way, I also going to admit I'm often a bad Buddhist. So thanks for being so honest. We want to give a shout out to your husband. You told us before how wonderful he is, John. Thanks for helping with the IT. And so much more to talk about. I feel like, I know, Joanna, you have a million more questions. Brian, you didn't get a word in edgewise today. So we got to get you back on the show, Sue. But thank you for joining us.
You're most welcome. And take care of you guys. And thank you for the invitation. It was fun and it was lovely. Take care of you. Have a great day.
Yeah, we'll do it. We'll do it again.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that was amazing. I love her. It's like I love her because she's so smart and knowledgeable. She's got a little edge. She keeps it real.
She's funny.
Right. I love it that she's funny and she cares. Like I love how the amygdala whisper. It is a thing. She does get credit for that. How you can hear her in action and feel her in action when she gets into that mode. She lowers her voice and she gets a little slower and quieter. And I'm like, oh my God, I totally trust you. Like, let me tell you everything. But what I love about it is, and again, for people watching and listening, we can do that for each other, right? That's what I love, is that what she is showing us what to do, right? If we want to build that safety in our relationships and things are going a little haywire, like, ooh, and my little guy, my son Alex, who's 10, when he's feeling upset, his voice goes down. He talks a little quietly, like, and I'll know, okay, it's time for me to do the same. And so it's just such a stealth, like, ninja technique, right? Just to like shift. But you have to be aware and very intentional to make that shift. Anyway, I have a ton of things to say, but I've been talking for like 78 minutes straight. Brian, you didn't get a word in edgewise today. Sorry, bud. What are your favorite takeaways, observations? What did you love most about our discussion with Sue?
Well, I mean, I get now why you guys love her so much. She is wonderful. I mean, I can't wait to have her back on. Yeah, I mean, God, there were so many times I wanted to jump in, but I also did not want to like stop her train of thought because, yeah, I mean,
exactly. It's a powerful train. It was like a bullet train and a freight train, all wrapped in one.
Yeah, and she very briefly kind of mentioned when we were talking about the mythos, in media and kind of stereotypes and things like that. I actually learned an amazing thing from one of my friends. She's an amazing actor, but her acting coach is one of the more like famous ones in New York, and he has a great thing that says, "Anger isn't an emotion; it's a response."
Ooh.
Because I mean, look at it from an acting perspective. Like, someone is angry is such a boring. It doesn't like, why are you angry? And then, but that translates so heavily into real life, and it actually, with my fiance Sarah, when we first started dating, she'd get mad about something, and she would only surface level be angry and not realize like that anger is just a response to something. Like, you're either embarrassed, or you're feeling slighted, or you it's literally a thorn in a lion's paw. Like, you're mad because it hurts.
Yeah.
And so there's
I feel like
this.
sometimes you're mad not just because it hurts. This happened to me literally dark. I got mad, and then I didn't like my reaction, and that's what it was like. I felt embarrassed because I'm like, oh, am I not supposed to be above it all? I work so hard to cultivate peace and acceptance and to know how to handle these things. So it's good. It got me back into humility, where it's always a good place to be. Not like I try to be anything other than, humble, but I feel like, to me, it's like a double whammy. Like, not only does it kind of suck to feel, those feelings that you described with Sarah, but I'm assuming, not to project onto her, but that then you also go like, oh, don't I know better now? Right. And then you judge yourself.
Yeah. Then you have
Right.
shame. And
yeah,
few things trigger more intense anger than shame. And if you're feeling
that
ashamed,
embarrassment
that you felt
thing,
angry, that's a spiral.
But it's weird because like it's funny, both of us have done this as we've grown together. But understanding why you're angry makes you a lot less angry. Like,
Yeah.
it's so funny because, like, I mean, even in like the littlest things, right? Like, let's say I'm at Dunkin' Donuts and someone is like wiling out and like in line or whatever, and I'm getting like mad at them.
Did you say wiling out?
Yeah, it's like
He's
they're
not letting
acting
anyone
crazy.
in. What does that
They're like
mean?
they're
Wiling
acting a
out.
fool. Like,
What? Acting cuckoo.
they're yeah.
Oh. I'm
They're
gonna use
they're
that
being
with my kids. I'm gonna ask them why they're wiling out, and they're gonna fall over.
They're going to be horrified and delighted.
they're like, hey kids, this dinner is bussin', right? But even like okay, let's say I'm there, and then like I'm getting mad or whatever, and it's like maybe two reasons, right? One, like, I guess for some reason in New York, I have an expectation that everyone's going to be chill in a line, and that's kind of on me for having that expectation. But also,
Amen, brother.
B, though, like if someone is like being rude to the employee or whatever, it's like I'm feeling empathetic and like that, like almost like slighted on their behalf. It's like
Yeah.
they don't make enough to deal with your crap or whatever,
Right.
and I'm getting mad at them. Like, and it's like I'm not saying that anger is never justified. I'm just saying that like there's usually like underlying causes or messages under it, and that's always so.
And
I don't
once
know,
you
just interesting
find
to me.
that, then you can be like, what did I want to create? Like in that moment, if what you're feeling, and this goes right back to Sue and something she said that was so moving to me. It's like, what do you want to create? Well, okay, I'm feeling slighted on behalf of this person that works here. Like they're being so rude. Instead of being mad at them, which makes things more stressful, then you can be like, oh, that's what that feeling is. And then when you see them, you can do what Sue was saying and look them in the eye and be like, I saw that. That felt challenging and wow. And, you know, that process of that's actually going to make the difference, right? Is to be like,
Right.
wow, that was a handful. And I watched that and I saw that. Because sometimes don't we just, like she said, we just want to be seen, right?
Right. Can you believe that guy? Yeah, here's an extra $5. You don't deserve that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, but I think it's just back to the ability to have that maturity that you described, Brian, and, you know, cue the applause for being so honest and keeping it real. Thank you, darling. But I yay, all right, we love that. But I think it's like the uninvited Buddha thing, right? This thing happens. We didn't want it to happen. It's not what we expected. And there's a little kind of bit of victim, and then like, oh God, now it's taking me longer. And by the way, you and I totally relate. At times, when I'm a fast walker, I'll be walking up 6th Avenue in Manhattan, and it's freaking crowded. I'm like, why are these people walking so slow? Like, I own the galldarn sidewalk, and I know you've talked about that, Brian, where it's like, it's so, I feel like it's so narcissistic, I think, right? Like, it's just about me. And so I love this idea of when we feel anger, for what I've been trying to do is really to explore that. What am I, you know, whether it's a person or a situation or whatever it is, what is it teaching me? To me, that's the uninvited Buddha situation. Where do I feel threatened? Right. And then I always feel like I go through that process and it's, oh my gosh, it's so liberating on the other side. Right. But it's that journey of feeling one's own humanness. Right. And, you know, a little bit of that for me anyway, again, feeling a little out of control. Right. Because when you're angry, now you said the word respond. I would say to me, the word is react. Right. I react when I'm out of control. And then I'm embarrassed, you know, then like, oh shit, like I'm embarrassed that, and nobody else even knows. Like, but I know because I really aim for integrity. And then it's like, okay, this didn't happen. You know, it's back to the little Tony Robbins. Is it happening for me, right, or to me? And I feel like more and more when I'm able to just a little dispassionately get on the other side and go, God, what just happened? All right, how is this happening for me? What do I have to learn from it? Because there's something in here for me, you know, and that to me is profoundly empowering. But I agree with you, Joanna, too, back into the Sue Johnson and EFT, that when we do that work, that we can get curious and empathetic with ourselves, then we're able to bring that to other people.
So I have this little family that I follow on Instagram, and I don't do a lot of these family vloggers, but this is the deaf family. They're called the deaf family, and the parents and all the kids are all either deaf or clinically hard of hearing. And I love watching them because I learn so much about how we communicate with each other. When you're not using spoken language, it's so much more visual. Like the little baby's like 16 months old, and he reaches up and he grabs his dad's head and it just turns it so like, Dad, listen to me, you know, just gently. And because that's a way of getting dad's attention and it's generally acceptable, you know what I mean? Instead of, we might think it's rude, the dad then locks eyes on him and they talk. And the amazing thing was this little baby was babbling in American Sign Language and the dad reflecting back with American Sign Language babble. And when you see it like that, and the little boy is delighted and gets more enthusiastic, and the dad is babbling, and then the dad is also adding words and clarifying. And I thought, this is the most magical and affirming thing to see played out. And reminded me of how I want to be, not just with my older kids, but with my husband and my mom and my friends, and that sort of very, I'm right here kind of feeling.
I love that. I feel like, well, I mean, we know that oxytocin is developed through eye contact, right? I mean, it's like they say eyes are the window of the soul, but there's really something happening in our nervous system. But so one, just on a physiological, biological level, but what I love about that, and I'm right there with you, Joanna, when you just go, that's what I want. That's what matters most. But I always feel like here's the rub, I think, for so many of us. It's like we want somebody else, so many of us want somebody else to give that to us, but it's back to that's what we give, right? And that's, so that's how we show up and how we see other people. And that becomes this like genuinely holy, karmic, just, wonderful.
It's almost magic.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is what we crave most, right? And then I feel like, but in part, we don't do that because we're stressed and we have too much to do. And what were you talking? Oh, the heroic individualism for moms. It's like so often we either inherit or somehow we give ourselves these undoable, like these impossible tasks, right? And then we wonder why we can't just freely babble, if you will, kind of babbling with each other. Well, we have too freaking much to do, right? And we're telling ourselves we have this goddamn, to-do list. I'm a freaking slave to my to-do list. It's the worst. And I have to tell myself, my kids are getting ready to go to sleepaway camp for 3.5 weeks. I tell myself, I mean, this last week, it's like, okay, anything you want to do, mom's here, right? And because they're getting ready to leave and they've never done that before. And so, yeah, I feel like we all know the answer. It takes a profound amount of, I think, discipline to get over that fear-based messaging of, back to like being enough. It's like, I need to show that I am the, perfectionistic superstar mom that, that we were talking about before. And if I don't, right, then I'm not good enough. And, and then I feel badly and, cue the downward spiral. But it's like, it's so much BS. I think Sue was saying how so often fear becomes so much bigger and ambiguous. And I've certainly had to rein myself in when I'm feeling overwhelmed, when it's like, it's not rational. Like it really isn't rational, but going unbridled and unchecked, it becomes this, this crazy out of control ghost. Anyway, I feel like I'm on this long tangent, but
well, that was kind of where I was going a little bit when I was saying that about like we are so locked down, and nobody in 98, 99, 2000, 2005, I don't know anybody was calling out like, hey, the moms can't do it all. It was like there was this pedestal. And then what I noticed for myself is I do start to shut down and I do get resentful, and there's no language for asking for help. And then what happens to the next generation when the moms who are doing everything are shut down and resentful? That's a big burden on our kids,
Well, and I think it's ironic because I'll speak in my life, speak to my life. I try so hard, right, between the work that I do and raising kids and as a member of my family and community, it's like I'm trying so freaking hard. And in part, it's ironic that I'm creating this disconnection because I'm so goal-oriented. It's like, I want to plan the party. I want to make sure my kids are getting to camp, blah, 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 getting them to basketball, getting them to baseball, or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And it's like that mindset of, like back to the human doing versus human being that for me, I've had to really get clear and again, much more disciplined and grow. I call myself out. You guys know that. I'll say to myself, Andrea, it's time to grow up emotionally, right? And get real about what is really important. And I come from a very workaholism, perfectionism, right? I mean, these things that are so insidious. It's not okay for me to have to drink too much, to have an eating disorder. Like there are a bunch of things I can't do because I've seen the shadow side of all that. So I never allowed myself. I did allow myself to have unrealistic expectations that I could never, ever, ever meet. And I almost killed myself trying to meet those things. And then, yes, Joanna, then you add trying to be a super mom on top of it and getting to the school. And not that I'm on the PTA, but I show up for the field trips. I'm doing all that. Like, let me show up and help with the fair or the carnival or make the hamburgers and it's just like, oh my God, it is just too much. And then no wonder I feel angry and disconnected.
Yeah.
Right. And then my husband will say, you're doing too much.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm going to freak out.
But then what do you cut? That's the hard thing.
Yeah.
What gets cut? It is like I got that bee sting that got infected a couple weeks ago. And what was wild about it was working, kids, whatever. And not noticing that I had a bee sting that was making my arm ginormous and then got infected and was flaming hot until someone was like, what the hell is wrong with your arm? And I was like, oh, I'll be okay.
Oh my God, you sound like me.
Yeah,
yes,
that's what we do.
Like, I'm just going to keep going. I'm just going to keep going.
And then what happened was,
it's like the flesh wound. You remember in, what was that, the night? It's only a flesh wound.
Oh, yeah. What movie is that?
Monty Python.
What was weird is
It's
I
Monty
said,
Python, Black Knight.
Yes. It's like, for me at that moment, I was like, this is like putting the lobster in the cold water in the pot and putting the lid on, where it just goes slowly hotter and hotter and hotter. And like, you don't notice until it was like, all of a sudden I looked and there were blisters across my skin. And I was like, I should maybe go to the doctor. Once I started getting better, I was like, that was like the temperature was turned up so slowly that I didn't notice. And then I was forced to lie on the couch with my arm elevated for 48 hours. And I was like, well, this is the life. Can
I get stung by bees every day? I would like to invite an apiary here.
People bringing things to me, watching TV,
totally.
Slow it down.
But your point is the right question to ask. What do we give up? And everybody obviously has to answer that question. How I'm answering the question for myself, I went through a pretty intense feeling of regret and guilt. I mean, it comes and goes because I'm a mom, right? But a couple weekends ago, I went through a really intense feeling of guilt and regret by virtue. And I do a lot for and with my kids, right? But there's somehow, again, this never enough. And I've for many, many years have, most of my life felt like not enough, keep going, more. And I finally just come to this conclusion, like, I just got to knock it off. I just have to say to myself, it's not true. And critically, and it's messy. I wish it could be a little easier. It's not. But to say to myself how I show up for my kids and my family and the people that I love, right? That quality of showing up and being present, because that connection is the most important thing, right? And I feel like back to what Sue was talking about, that this profound sense of disconnection is what is causing these deaths of despair, causing all this trauma, causing all this hurt and heartache. And so I'm a little bit of the Gandhi philosophy of change starts with me. I've had to call myself out and say, okay, it's okay. The grief and the guilt are appropriate because I have isolated myself in service to this mythical standard that I could never, ever possibly reach. So there is real loss and hurt and heartache in that, but I see it. I'm willing to now say, how do I change? How can I show up? And even if it's not a ton of time, I mean, I love how she talked about the thing we need to do as parents is create that emotional connection with my kids. So what I know I need to do, even on days when I'm super busy and we're running around, even if it's 5 minutes of genuine connection, to genuinely see my kids and let them know that I got their back, that I adore them, right? I just feel like that's enough, right? I mean, I say that in air quotes, like that is enough, because so often I felt like, oh, it's not enough. I need to play a game of Uno. I need to go on a bike ride. Like we need to bake a cake together. And right. And it's just this impossible, unattainable level of achievement that really has this ugly underbelly, because it isn't attainable.
We actually just published in the last few days an article on Your Tango that was about basically expert didn't call it this, but basically it was like an achievement addiction.
Oh,
And
yeah.
one thing that happens when we have this desperate need for something that might be called addiction non-clinically is we get angry when something gets in the way of it. Like, I need to get my hit. And I found that's my biggest thing as a parent that I have to stop is it's like, no, you're getting in the way of all these things I have to do. And like, how am I going to do my thing if you've got this? And it's, that is so bad. And it's like, God, like I need to find something to put on a Post-it so I remember.
Achievement addiction. You heard it here first, folks. Achievement addiction. But it's interesting to me because I am sure it's a dopamine thing, and I'm like every bell and every neuroreceptor is going off in my head right now, and it reminds me a lot of why we compulsively check our phones. It's like, ooh, what's that thing that's like I need the hit, and then to your point, like I feel good checking stuff off the list. I need the hit. It's telling me I'm doing a good job because let's face it, for most of us, we're not told very often that we're doing a good job.
Yeah.
Right. And not that we should sit around and wait for it, but somehow having that feedback loop. And so I feel like it ends up being this thing that we get from our brains and our nervous system, to your point. We get the hit when we can cross it off the list or we get that thing done. And I'm with you. OMG, at times it's like back to trying to be a good Buddhist. All right, there is a bottleneck. There is an unexpected curveball in my plans. And now what do we do with that, right? I mean, and to me, that is also growing up emotionally. And it's hard for us, Joanna, as type A Aries, right? But it's, it does, right. What are you going to do with us?
I'm multiple Gemini. I'm like Gemini all the way down. So
Geminis are who can handle us, I think.
Oh, thank goodness.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. All good things come to an end. And unfortunately, that means it's the end of our show today. Of course, we will be back again and again. We have so many amazing guests teed up. But before we end up today, I want to make sure you all know how to find Dr. Sue Johnson's work. You can go to Dr. Sue Johnson, DrSueJohnson.com. Put it in the show notes for me, will you, Brian, my friend? I'm like, people can spell Johnson. Oh, there we go. Yeah, people can spell Johnson with an E, and anyway. So just to really drive home the point, there are incredible resources. There are a lot of EFT counselors and clinicians out there. If that's your thing, and you want to meet with somebody in person or over Zoom, but if you just say, you know what, I want to tiptoe into this, there's an online program that's been very, very proven to be very effective. She's got multiple books. She's got the workbook. So if this show has resonated with you, or the things that Sue has had to say has resonated with you, you can follow up, learn more, give it a try. And, my hope is that you also find you're able to transform in your relationships. All right. And otherwise, please follow us wherever you listen to podcasts, like us, follow us, subscribe to us on YouTube. If you're interested in asking questions or have ideas for the show, please write to us at openrelationships@yourtango.com. We are going to be looking for more people to do little mini free coaching sessions with me on the show. So if you got a relationship issue, whether it's with your spouse, your child, a sister, a friend, an ornery coworker, we are doing free relationship coaching here on Open Relationships. So far, the results have been pretty awesome, folks. So if you're willing to come on, thank you. If you're willing to come on, and I emphasize this because so many of these relationship issues are so, they have such common roots, right? And that's what we're here to do. We're here to be open. We're here to be vulnerable. We're here to transform together. So that's it. Thanks for watching and listening, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the next show.
Bye, everybody.